Good evening. Welcome. I feel very excited, honored, and really humbled to be concluding this incredible lineup of speakers and scholars, women who I personally look up to tremendously and have learned so much from, and to bring this incredible mivtza to its conclusion. Hashem, for this last class, our class will take a little bit more of the path of a Farbrengen. I hope you'll humor me as we take this little journey, which I think I headed in this direction because I think it's a appropriate conclusion for this tremendous initiative of this 30-hour Learn-a-thon with all these different speakers on such an incredible variety of different topics, to really take the learning where learning belongs to the point of Avodah. So this is our, proper ending of all of the learning throughout the day. Before we start, I just want to mention that I would like to dedicate the class Lina Nishmas Sheina Malka Bas Meisha, the Shev and Elias and Neshama, and a lot of nachas from her children and grandchildren. Okay, so today we are looking at the Hayom Yom initially, and a little bit of Lakoti Deburim. So I don't think that the Hayom Yom needs an introduction to any of us. We are familiar from when we are children with the Hayom Yom. The Hayom Yom is the first sefer that our Rebbe ever wrote. The Rebbe wrote the Hayom Yom in the year Tafshi Gimel, which is 1943. At the request and instructions and very careful involvement of the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was then Rebbe at the time. The Frierdiker Rebbe actually mentioned that his desire to put together a calendar of Hasidic minhagim and hiskamim and stories that should be set up on a day-to-day basis, and that it needs to be done by a pnimi. The Frierdiker Rebbe mentioned this Farbrengen, I believe, about a year and a half before the Rebbe even came to America, and it was finally completed 3 years later by the Rebbe in America. The Rebbe put tremendous time and energy into setting up the Hayom Yom, and as Hasidim, I think we all know that we value the Hayom Yom as extremely precise and meaningful in the day-to-day relevance of each individual Hayom Yom. A lot of Chassidim pay close attention to the Hayom Yom that comes up on their birthday. I know personally mine is the Hayom Yom about using time wisely. Zimmer dicker Tag on a winter dicker Nacht is a Yar. So it's a pretty heavy one to read every year on my birthday. But I think that many people feel very connected in this way to the precision and the relevance of the Hayom Yom to that particular day. Perhaps less known is that there's actually been extensive study. Rabbi Michal Zeligson spent much time koching in the precision of the Hayom Yom, and found many connections of the Hayom Yom to each particular day on which it is found, that to dig deeply and to discover why the Rebbe assigned each Hayom Yom on that particular day. I think it's interesting when I thought, I personally love the Hayom Yom because I feel that it is a very bite-sized idea in Chassidus, that there's no time in my life it's not accessible and attainable for learning, and yet it gives me enough to think about and to live with, to really lift up and invigorate my day. And then when I went to look at the Hayom Yom for today, for what was today, for Vav Teves, I saw the relevance, particularly to this Learn-a-thon, but also to most obviously to the day after Hey Teves. So we're going to look at it together. Just going to bring it up here on the screen. Give me 1 minute here. Interestingly, one of the things that Rabbi Zeligson noticed and studied, noticed is an understatement, that starting from Hey Teves, the Hayom Yom of each day has a connection to the Rambam of that day. So if the Rambam was started on Hey Teves with Sefer Hamada, specifically from Sefer Hamada, there's a connection between each day and the Rambam for that particular day. Today, Vav Teves would be in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, and we can see that the Hayomim, as we're about to read, has a very close connection to, a very obvious connection to the Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, in which the Rambam discusses a Yid's obligation to know and understand what we can of Hashem and how we can come to know Hashem. And I personally see the connection to Hey Teves as well, in the sense that, and again, to what we've been working on here, that after the koch that we have in learning and in buying Sfarim, and obviously the purpose of buying the Sfarim is to learn the Sfarim, what is the end goal? What is the destination, so to speak, of all of this learning? That in order for the learning to be successful, as I've actually explains in other places as well, that if one knows the destination of where the learning is going, it actually causes the learning to take place in a different way, and the depth of understanding to really be increased because of the destination. So here the Batel gives us a focal point, the purpose of all of the learning. I'm going to just read. It says, Ksiv da'as alakei avicha, v'avaduhu b'leiv shalim. It's written in Divrei Hayamim, I believe, that you should know Hashem, the God of your fathers, v'avaduhu, and you should serve him b'leiv shalim, with a full heart. The word avaduhu is obviously the word that the same shirish that Hasidim used to refer to Avaida, which is where we're going here. That any concept of the whole idea of knowing, understanding, grasping, comprehending, even the deepest, most intellectual, most academic subjects that seem to be most removed from practicality, so to speak, the whole purpose of all of it, of the intellectual exercise, is for it to actually come down into Avaida, into work, into service. What do we mean by Avaida? So the Rebbe gives a very interesting definition of what Avaida is very precisely in the next sentence. Hainu, meaning, ulas davar, an actual effect, bebirur v'zicha chamidais, firstly, in refining, in elevating, in cleaning out our character traits. Point number one, the hiskashras pnimis, and also developing an internal, personal, honest connection. And these 2 points together, hanikra balashon hachasidus avoda. These two parts, two elements, are called avoda. To put it into different terms, maybe we would say that avoda means that the learning that we do affects the way that we react to challenges, bein adam l'chaverei, and the way that we react to challenges, things that challenge our connection bein adam l'makai, meaning how strong is our spiritual ability to deal with difficult people, to deal with difficult situations, bein adam l'chaverei, how edel are our midas in our relationships with others, and how strong is our real connection with Hashem when faced with difficulties, when things are not going necessarily so smoothly. I think not to say that the Rebbe is only talking about difficulties, but I think that's where we see, and that's the good litmus test to see where we're holding in this Avaida, because that's when we know what's really going on inside, what progress has really been made. I want to share this letter of the Rebbe just by way of introduction to where we're going. I personally think that the letter is an amazing letter. I read it at a time in my life when I really, really needed to hear it. But I actually want to call our attention specifically to the first two paragraphs, which kind of sum up the challenge that this Hayom Yom brings up. Well, the call to action and the difficulty in bringing it into action, because it's not really a very easy thing to accomplish. So there was writing, actually, I believe, to a young woman who is clearly, from the continuation of the letter, dealing with the challenge of feeling very, I don't want to say depressed, but has down spirits and feeling like things are not really going the way she had planned, or that the work that she's doing is not going anywhere, she's not accomplishing anything. General feeling of despondency about her current status in life, and a sense of like almost giving up. So Rebbe says to her, interestingly enough, it's also in Tevis, I just noticed that right now, blessings and greetings. I received your recent letter and the previous one. Listen to this sharp language. Needless to say, I was somewhat taken aback by the tone of your letter. It's a good illustration of how it is possible for a person to read and to learn and to receive instruction from books and teachers. And yet when it comes to actual experience, all this instruction goes by the wayside. I refer to the things which you have surely learned in the books of Musar, and especially Chassidus, about the fact of the Yetzer Hara to instill spirit of depression, discouragement, and despondency in order to prevent the Jewish person from fulfilling his divine mission. The letter is very nice. I'm going to just pause here because this is the part that I really wanted to lead us to our next point of thought. That it's possible for a person to learn and to believe that they're learning and to be involved in the learning and to enjoy the learning. And this is why I'm saying that the challenge is the litmus test of how our Avodah is doing, because when push comes to shove and things are not going our way, what happens? Do we have the mental, really the spiritual tools to be able to process the challenges in a way that strengthens our connection to Hashem and our connection to other people? Or do things break down at that point? Which is a good indication that all the learning that we did not necessarily come down to the point of pa'olas davar, of an actual impact on the plane, on the level of Avodah. In a certain sense, I definitely feel this for myself, that sometimes when learning doesn't come down to the point of, it's possible to learn something, and for the idea, especially when you're learning the Rebbe's Sichos and the Rebbe's, I don't want to say demands, but yeah, demands from Chassidim of our generation, and especially Chassidic women, and the Rebbe's description of reality, the Torah's description of reality, does not necessarily jive with my experience of reality. And the learning really stays only in the realm of an intellectual thing. I can intellectually comprehend it, but the fact is I don't feel that way. And this is not practical. This is not realistic. This is not my life. This is not what it actually feels like or looks like in reality. It's like reading those parenting books and they tell you like what the child's going to say back, and the child does not say that back. So sometimes it feels like that also when you're learning, that you think that, all this sounds great on paper, but when you actually come down to the realistic experience, this is not what happens. This is not the way I feel. This is not what my experience actually looks like. And not only does the learning not necessarily give me the tools I need to control my own frustration, anger, worry, discouragement. Sometimes it can even lead up to a place of chas v'shalom, bitterness, or even cynicism, disillusionment, this feeling like it all sounds nice in theory, but in practice, none of this has any real relevance to real life, and real life is different, and it's not, sometimes even a feeling like the Chassidus doesn't have anything to say about the experience of actual life for for me, I'm a young overwhelmed mom in Tafshin Pei Aleph. How does this jive with my actual experience of reality, which is not necessarily so rosy. So what we need to figure out is how do we how do we bridge that gap? How do we ease that tension? How do we make what we learn be something that has a tangible impact on our internal processing center, so to speak, the way we process our challenges that come our way. So first of all, I think it's important to understand where these challenges are coming from, why it is that the chassidus that we're learning doesn't jive with our reality, why it is that it feels so far-fetched almost in a way, so distant from the practicalities of real life. The first most important thing to understand, which the whole Tanya is based on this, is because we're built with a nefesh habahamis that is supposed to view the world from a worldly way. It's always going to be like that. And the nefesh halakis is always going to be the nefesh hashenis. It's always going to be our second reaction. I mean, with practice, we can train ourselves to get better at responding. But the nefesh halakis is not, without avodah, our nefesh halakis is not going to be our default reaction to anything, even with avodah, perhaps not. Our nefesh habahamis' reaction is always going to be the default reaction that we have. And we have to work from that default reaction. So we can't expect the chassidus to have a magical or automatic impact on our emotions just by learning it. And secondly, I would posit that because of our the onslaught of the Friedrich calls it in various places, and we're about to learn the Friedrich silent Torah in the Burn, the Hanachas Ha'olam, the world's assumptions, the world's thought processes, the secular perspective on life is, no matter how hard we work to insulate our homes, and I would say it's probably a good idea to insulate our homes and, encourage that. But on the flip side, it's never going to be possible for us to really insulate our homes from the world's point of view, the world's way of thinking, because it just comes in from every corner. It comes into our communities from every corner. It comes into the way we speak to each other, the way we chat with our siblings, the way we chat with our friends. It's coming in from every single, seeping in through every hole. And it's in direct conflict. It creates a very different picture than the picture presented in Chassidus. So to kind of deal with this tension, I don't have an answer. I don't think there is one simple answer, because then it would not be called Avodah. Called avodah for a reason. But the best place I feel like that we can search out an answer to this question is in some of the Farbrengens of the Friedrich Rebbe L'Kutei Diburim, which we're going to be looking into, is a written collection of the Friedrich Rebbe's Farbrengens from the year 1929 to 1950, wherein the Friedrich Rebbe was in Latvia and in Poland and the United States. They are records of Farbrengens. They're not, unlike the Rebbe's Farbrengens, they are not written down by Chassidim. The Friedrich Rebbe himself wrote down the Farbrengen after the Farbrengen happened, and it's not necessarily a word by word. There's not as far as I understand, there's not an attempt made for it to be a word for word record of the Farbrengen. And instead, the Friedrich Rebbe is kind of presenting the Farbrengen in a literary form so that it fits well as a piece of writing. Like in the title, L'Kutei Diburim was published likut by likut, one booklet, so to speak, at a time after the Farbrengens, and then dispersed amongst the Chassidim. And the style of the Friedrich Rebbe's Farbrengen, in general, the style of Friedrich Rebbe's Chassidus is very practical, very warm, very descriptive, and it's a real Farbrengen. And the Friedrich Rebbe's Farbrengens were a lot smaller than, let's say, the Farbrengens of our Rebbe. And it's interesting to see how the Chassidim ask questions in the Farbrengens, and the Friedrich Rebbe answers the questions. It's really, really, really geschmack learning, reading. It's translated into English. We're actually going to be reading from the English because I myself am much more comfortable in the English. The Yiddish in L'Kutei Diburim has a nice cover. One second, like that. The English in the Yiddish in L'Kutei Diburim is difficult for me, even though I can understand the Rebbe's Sikha Yiddish. It's very hard. It's a little bit more of a more challenging Yiddish for me. And also, if you don't feel that you have the time to do intense I don't want to say this on Batsheva's thing, but if you don't have the time to really immerse yourself in full academic learning at this point in your life, you could always pick up a Lakota Devarim and read just a few sentences, a little piece, a little paragraph here and there, and it lifts you up a little bit. It picks you up into a different state of mind. So we'll take we'll see what we have time for, two little excerpts from Lakota Devarim that talk a little bit about this topic of Avodah. The first one we're going to be looking at, so let me just find the beginning here, is where the Friedrich Rebbe describes the difference between a chitzain, a superficial person, and a pnimi, somebody who, wow, we'll read it inside. I'm a little bit stumped on the translation of what is a pnimi. Coming before this in the Farbrengen is a more technical discussion of the difference between an Ar Makif and an Ar Pnimi in Chassidus, what the different meanings are, the difference between them in meaning in Chassidus. Just to give a very, very, very brief and not thorough explanation, it's something which is explained at length in various sources in Chassidus. A concept of an Ar Makif is a transcendent revelation, something that's not able to be processed by the recipient because it is beyond the capabilities, it's beyond the processing faculties of the recipient, whatever the recipient is at whatever level it is. So within a person, it's something that's higher than their intellectual understanding and higher than their emotional capacity to process. Usually it's referred to as Ratzain, as will, or Tainug, of pleasure, meaning it transcends both of them. It has a huge impact on a person, but not in a conscious way. It's not something that the person consciously processes necessarily. It has an impact on them from the outside, whereas an Ar Pnimi is something which affects the person from the inside, step by step, in a more measured and calculated way. And by definition, it's going to have to be a much more limited and focused revelation because it has to fit within the capabilities that the person has right then. So this is a general concept of a Makif and Pnimius, and here that brings it down to talking about people as well. I'm reading from where it says, in bygone days. It's right here. In bygone days, a person whose avodah remained at the level of Makif used to be called a chitzain. A chitzain means superficial, an outward person. In the eyes of the Tzmimim, the students who were studying at Tamchet Tzmimim, the kind of character thus described was despised and out of bounds. Ma'os u'pasal, I believe it reads in the original Yiddish. There were a number of quite fine students who toiled earnestly in their Talmudic studies, spent their time conscientiously in the study of Chassidus, comprehended their studies, each according to his abilities, and davened with commendable warmth. But all this was experienced in an outward manner, in a manner of chitzainius. I'm going to jump down to right here. It is easier, at the very bottom of the page, it is easier to err with regards to something makif than it is its pnimi counterpart. A person who is characterized by chitzainius lives in delusion. The original Yiddish reads, er is a mutta, he's constantly mistaken. He deludes himself. One who is a pnimi does not live in delusion. He knows where he stands and what the particular concept before him means, and is preoccupied with making himself more of a vessel that will be able to absorb the things which occupy him. I want to focus on this sentence, but we'll come back to it in a minute. A chitzain, by contrast, is deluded both as regards himself and as regards whatever concept confronts him. His error can take one of several forms, sometimes veering too much in the direction of ascent and sometimes too much in the direction of descent. This may be readily observed. The description is just, it's incredible. There are times when he describes a thing in glowing terms that are, maybe I'm actually living exactly what the Friedrich Rebbe is describing, that are well beyond its justifiable proportions. And there are times when he disparages a thing more than is warranted. For a chitzain in general is one who exaggerates. It's not that the exaggeration stems from falsehood. It comes from the fact that he is a person who lives in delusion, meaning the Friedrich Rebbe is saying it's not that the chitzain is putting on a superficial front and pretending to be someone that he or she is not, but rather the front is also for he or she himself, meaning let's put it in first person, we, include everyone else in it, we feel that the feelings are, coming from a holy place, coming from a good place. We get very, very excited about it. But if we're being honest with ourselves, the excitement is not necessarily coming from the real me, not necessarily the me who also gets excited about, cheesecake and ice cream. He fools himself. He grasps concepts superficially without the inward dimension of pneumius. And just as he absorbs, so he exudes. The original Yiddish reads, it's an expression from kashrus, that the general rule in kashrus is that the way something takes in becomes a certain, becomes treif, so to speak, or takes in any, even if it's not treif, like the way it becomes fleshig, so to speak. It's the same way that you can take out the level, the fleshicness of the pot or whatever the utensil is, either boiling or in blow torching or whatever it is. This is the concept in kashrus. But here the Friedrich was using it to mean that the chitzon is somebody who absorbs in this way, meaning he takes things in a superficial way, and so too he gives things over in a superficial way. He expresses from himself in a very superficial way. I'm going to go on to the next paragraph here. A chitzon studies nigla, the revealed levels of the Torah. He studies chassidus. Quite often in the course of his prayers, he meditates on the chassidus he's been studying, and all of this is done with warmth. Indeed, there are such whose warmth may be perceived more than that of a pnimi. This line really, this sentence here really brings out the idea that it's not. We're not saying that it's somebody who's not interested in chassidus. We're not saying that it's somebody who's not learning chassidus or who's not reacting, so to speak, to the chassidus. But the reaction is not necessarily coming from an honest point inside of themselves. It's not necessarily really real to the person, and because of that, they could get more excited about it than somebody who's processing it more slowly. But the excitement is transient. It's something that comes and goes because it never really reached the very honest part of the person themselves. A pnimi needs time. He cannot hurry. First, he studies. Then he meditates on the concept he has been studying. He absorbs it inwardly until eventually he is warmed by it and is aroused by it. And all this takes time. So this is really where I wanted to focus. That I think the first step in the process of making our learning real is to recognize that real change takes a lot of time. It's not something that you learn a sikha, you learn a mimer, you learn anything, and there is a flush of excitement that comes with intellectual attainment of an idea. But that's not the pneumistic emotional change that the idea is supposed to affect in a person. The real change, the kind of change that you can call on when faced by challenges, like we were talking at the beginning, that kind of internal impact takes a lot of time. And working within one concept, it doesn't have to be, again, this is, I feel, relevant to those of us who are pressed for time and don't necessarily have the time to sit and learn as much as we would like to. It doesn't have to be a lot of learning. It has to be a lot of working mentally on the learning, a lot of processing the learning that we're doing. And it's something that it's okay if there's no immediate reaction, as long. And this is going back to the sentence. I brought it here in the original Yiddish because I really like the sentence. As long as we're following this kind of guide of what is a pnimi, a veist vuar is, I know who I really am. I am, an epical person who's into cheesecake and ice cream and also yells at my kids sometimes, and is not necessarily always so happy with, the way Hashem runs my life either. And he also recognizes what the chassidus is saying. He's not going to try to warp the chassidus or the Torah that he's learning to mean what he or she wants it to mean, to make it more practical, to make it more realistic, to make it more jive with the way I would like my reality to be. Because unfortunately, we see that too, that, there's sometimes a move to make things be what we want them to be, because then it feels more realistic, then it feels more practical. No, the chassidus is what it is. The Rebbe's requests are what they are. The Rebbe's perception of reality and his pull to have us recognize reality for what it is, it really is what it is. But Nebuch, I'm not there. I am what I am. And so if we get this far, then we still run into a really big problem, which is kind of, I give up. Like, this is what's real. This is who I am. And the distance between them is quite far, maybe feels unbridgeable. And so, whatever, yeah, in theory, it's true. And I know it's true and I know it's real, but it's not me. The last step in being a pnimi and being truly honest with yourself is not just to know where I am, but to know that I need to put in the work to get a little bit closer, to bring a little bit more step by step. And there's no hurry. The fact that I'm not going to accomplish it today or tomorrow or in a week or in a month or in 5 years or 10 years or maybe ever, but that I'm going to make small steps to bring that to be part of my reality. That's what Avodah is. To take the small, slow steps to slowly change. And the Rebbe goes on here in the Torah, if you keep reading, to talk about as well, to work on the midas and to know that changing a midah also takes time. It's not, you can't change your reactions, your natural response to other people overnight. It's something that takes years. And the Rebbe mentions, which I find very relatable, that even when you feel like you've made an accomplishment when it comes to your midas, to constantly check up, because the accomplishments that we've made in the past wear off. They don't necessarily last, unfortunately. We go back to old habits that are not necessarily good habits. And that's the avodah of a pnimi. It takes a lot of day-to-day mental effort to integrate the truth of the reality described by Torah into the truth of the reality of the experience that I'm having right now, so that it actually speaks to my reality. It's going to take a lot of time. The last sentence there, und liegt als in wären mehr Kli zu dem in Wasser liegt, that the pnimi is somebody who completely puts himself into becoming a better keli, more of a, I don't know if this translates vessel, but it's a very poor translation. More of a kli to accomplish, to bring into reality, to bring into his own experience this davar hamusag, this concept that he's learned. I want to talk about a second point as well, but we're really running out of time. So I'll just mention it very quickly and point out where it is in Likutei Devarim, and you can go ahead and take a look at it. It's, first of all, it's an excerpt from a very, very long Farbrengen, which is, most of it describes a story. It's a famous story of the Schwarze Klipa for anybody who's familiar with it. But specifically, the element that I wanted to focus on is the idea of imagination, that one of the Friedrich describes that one of the important traits for a chassid to develop is the koach hatzior, the ability to imagine, to draw a picture of something. The Friedrich describes firstly that the first of all, the importance of being able to draw a mental image of an academic subject, an academic picture, like a certain intellectual understanding, a visual understanding of the image, of the idea. But secondly, to actually be able to bring to mind, to draw a picture in your mind that can lift you out of the reality that you're in right now and to place you in a completely different reality. I believe in the first volume, the English volumes, it's I have to find which likut it's in. The Friedrich talks about imagination and then goes on to describe there's very famous descriptions there of life in Lubavitch. There's the description of Elul in Lubavitch, and I believe baking matzahs in Lubavitch, if I remember correctly, comes in there as well, where the Friedrich is almost trying to give over this picture to the reader, who obviously was not necessarily there, because the Friedrich is this linking generation between the life of the shtetl, the life in Lubavitch, and modern life, modern city life, and eventually the Friedrich comes to America as well, and so American life as well, and to give the reader this perspective, this picture. The excerpt that I brought here, actually in the in the chapter before, the Friedrich Rebbe talks about that in the imagination, the Kayach HaTzir also allows one to picture the original giving over of the Hasidic concept that they're living, meaning that the person can, and really here the Friedrich Rebbe talks about at the beginning a lot, the ability to bring yourself back to a time or to a place when a person felt spiritually uplifted, when a person had a kind of a moment of emes, obviously in the presence of a Rebbe, listening to a Maimer, going to Yechidus, as Rebbe describes, in the walls of Tamchet Tumimim, to be able to bring themselves back to this emes moment. A lot of us don't have these memories. And it seems to me, I'm very much, editorializing over here, but it seems to me that the Friedrich Rebbe is telling us from his own description of these events that a person can bring themselves back there also with the Kayach HaTzir, the Kayach HaDimyon, even if they weren't there, and is trying to paint that picture for us. And the value of the picture, and in our generation, we're very lucky because we're assisted in this effort by, the tremendous amount of videos and pictures and recordings where we can actually listen to the original places where they've taught certain concepts in Chassidus, certain Maimar, and we can go back and we can actually we don't even necessarily need that Kayach HaTzir, unless we just need to tune in and focus, to be able to access not just the intellectual idea, but not just the Torah, but the nice in a Torah. That this itself is something that we can draw kayches from. But secondly, and this was more to the point of what we were discussing earlier, in this story, the story is about essentially about a Jewish man who left the path of Yiddishkeit and eventually becomes a very hated overseer on the estate of a parrot, and how I believe Yitzchak Berditchev travels to the estate and basically brings him to have his Cyrus of Tshuva. But within this story, the Friedrich Rebbe brings the story and talks about the ability of this particular man to visualize a memory in his mind, and that this power that this man had to bring a situation to life in his own mind. He describes this scenario of a soldier who gets sent from one officer to the next, an ever ascending order of importance, and the tremendous fear that would overcome the soldier if he would be sent to the Kaiser himself eventually. And as he's telling the story, he faints. That's the idea that's brought out here. And that ability to be able to really bring himself to the place where he's actually experiencing this description that he's telling over is what it was able to lift him out of the situation that he was in and make him do teshuvah. So the second point that I really wanted to make was that I think in order for us to be able to create this connection between the things that we learn and the reality that we live, we have to really work in our mind when we're talking about the slow avodah. The work of the slow avodah is to work in our mind to build up a mental image of the Torah's, Hashem's view of the world, the Torah's view of the world, of the Rebbe's view of our world. The Rebbe gave us so much material, so to speak, to draw a picture of what the world looks like to him, of what Yidden look like to him, of what our purpose in this world looks like, of the fact that the world is Hashem's garden and is truly good despite all of the not good things, of the Mashiachic reality that we're supposed to be living in. the Rebbe paints this picture of a world that is very, very different than the world you would see if you just looked at it with regular eyes. And when we learn the Rebbe's Torah, we see for a minute a glimpse of the Rebbe's world. But the real slow avodah is to work on integrating that view into my own view of the world. How can I, and again, it's a slow process and it's one little bit at a time, you know, one step, two steps forward, one step back kind of avodah, to see a little bit of the Rebbe's mental image of the world, so I can visualize when I think about the challenges that I face. I can see the hashgacha pratis in them because I'm working to create a picture of the world as Hashem's world that I can mentally bring to life the vibrancy of the world with the way Chassidus sees the world. It's not something that happens automatically from our learning. It's not something that happens just because you learned something or just because you spoke about something. The default reaction is always going to be to relate to the world the way the Nefesh Bahamas relates to the world and the way the secular world relates to a problem. A very good example that's very relevant to women is the idea of bringing a child into this world. Of, you know, there was strong encouragement to have big families. We naturally have a reaction from our own Nefesh Bahamas, which is, you know, always going to be selfish and self-centered, and to the world's point of view, because it's something that seeps in from every corner. The avodah is to try to create a picture that matches our own reality with the description of reality that Chassidus gives, so that that description feels more like it really fits with my life. And in this way, hopefully, to lift our own experience a little bit so that our own experience does feel a little bit lighter, that we can, so to speak, talk our way through our challenges, for bring to ourselves through our challenges so that we can process them through the eyes of Chassidus. And like we said before, it's a process that takes a lot of time. And we need to have the patience to, the patience with ourselves, to give ourselves the time and to live the process without getting frustrated that we haven't gotten anywhere, because the point, as we all know from the Tanya, is the process, not the actual full achievement, because that is something that's just in the realm of tzaddikim. So I think we are going to pause there with a strong urging to go ahead and donate some money to Batsheva Academy, which has Batsheva Learning Center, sorry, I think it's called now, which I personally am very impressed and inspired by Hadassah's work and her vision and her dream and all the people who work with her for women's learning, and really inspired by the vision and inspired by the extent to which the vision has been brought to reality and is in process. So Yashkayach to you, Hadassah, and to all of your people. And Mirz Hashem, may we, the Jewish women, the Neshei of Bnei Chabad, lead the way, like the Rebbe says in the Hayom, be in the front lines to welcome Mashiach with the special koiches of women. Have a lovely night.